The message and the world. To spread the good news takes courage. In John 15:18-20, Jesus is warning his disciples that the world will reject and persecute them, just as it rejected and persecuted him. The core message is that following Christ and believing his teachings will lead to opposition and suffering, not because of the disciples' actions, but because they are followers of Jesus, who was himself hated by the world. John 15:18. If the world hates you, know that it hated me first. Jesus emphasizes that the world's opposition to the disciples is a natural consequence of their association with him. The world hated him, so it will also hate those who follow him. John 15:19. If you were of the world would love you as its own, but because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. The reason the world hates the disciples is because they are not part of the world's system of values and ways of thinking. They have been chosen by Jesus to follow a different path, one that is not aligned with the world's desires. John 15:20. Remember the word that I said to you, a servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. Jesus reiterates that the disciples can expect to face the same opposition and persecution that he did. He reminds them that they are his servants, and a servant's lot is often to be treated in the same way as the master. John 15:18 states, if the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. This verse, part of a larger section in John 15, is a warning to Jesus' followers that they will face opposition and persecution from the world, just as Jesus did. The sermon typically explores the reasons for this hatred, the importance of not being afraid, and how to respond in faith. The sermon often explains that the world hates Christians because they don't align with its values and ways of thinking. Jesus' followers are seen as a challenge to the world's system. The example of Jesus. The verse highlights that Jesus was hated first, and his followers will also experience rejection and persecution. This should encourage them to remember that they are following in the footsteps of their master. Not surprised, not discouraged. The sermon emphasizes that Christians should not be surprised or discouraged by the world's hatred, but rather should be strengthened in their faith and be confident in their identity as followers of Christ, resisting the temptation to compromise. The sermon might discuss the temptation to conform to the world's standards to gain acceptance. It emphasizes that true discipleship requires faithfulness to Christ, even when it means facing opposition, the importance of staying true to Christ. The sermon could encourage the congregation to remain steadfast in their faith, even in the face of persecution. This involves being unafraid to proclaim the gospel and stand firm in their convictions. God's grace and strength. The sermon might also focus on God's grace and strength to help Christians endure persecution. It can remind believers that they are not alone, and that God will provide the resources they need to remain faithful. In essence, a sermon on John 15:18 encourages believers to be prepared for opposition from the world. Remember that they are following in the footsteps of Jesus. Not be discouraged by hatred, but rather be strengthened in their faith. Resist the temptation to compromise their faith for the sake of acceptance. Remain faithful to Christ even in the face of persecution. Seek God's grace and strength to endure trials. What does bear fruit mean in John 15? In John 15, bearing fruit signifies the outward expression of a life transformed by Christ, demonstrating discipleship and obedience. It's not just about good deeds, but rather a natural result of abiding in Christ, like a branch drawing nourishment from the vine. This fruit can manifest in various ways, including loving others, sharing faith, and living a godly life. Living a godly life. It involves demonstrating character and actions that reflect Christ's love and values. Have you ever felt like an outsider rejected by the world around you? In John chapter 15, Jesus shares a profound truth that's still incredibly relevant today. He tells his followers, "If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first." These words echo through time, reminding us that following Jesus isn't always going to be easy or popular. Jesus goes on to say that if we belong to the world, it would love us as its own. But here's the thing. We're called to be different. Just as they persecuted him, Jesus warns that his followers will face persecution too. It's not exactly the most comfortable message, but it's real, raw, and honest. And in a way, it's actually reassuring to know that when we face opposition for our faith, we're walking the same path Jesus did.